All right, the offensive line is obviously near and dear to the heart of Sam Pittman. I came across some numbers today that I thought were pretty impressive. One being that there are 16 scholarship players at offensive line on the roster, and 9 of them were rated as 4 stars by at least one service. And also that they've bulked up this offensive line. It's per man 23 pounds heavier this past season in 2021 than it was when Sam Pittman arrived in 2019.
Yeah, they'll get heavier too. I mean, the expectation is they're still gonna add the weight. A lot of starters back, a lot of guys that either rotated or started coming back this year. Question marks at the left tackle spot, but I think they'll be all right there. Yeah, that shouldn't shock anybody. And of course I know it doesn't you, Mark, considering you know all about Sam Pittman and his background as an offensive line coach. He's living up to that reputation. The offensive line last year, just so much better than what we've seen the last 4 years, and they're only going to get better up front. And that they're bringing back Ricky Stromberg, who's a potential, could be a late first round pick, maybe a second round kind of caliber. When you talk about his ceiling as a player, he's absolutely someone who could find himself. If he has a good enough year, if he builds on what he's accomplished these last 2-3 seasons, he's been a starter since a freshman. He's got the experience, he's got the awareness, the know-how, the knowledge, and he's got the raw talent. He's difficult to deal with if you're a defensive lineman. He's not someone who gives up much. He doesn't give up a lot of ground. Powerful center for them, and it was huge for him to come back because he had considered going to the NFL, and as I was told, he seriously considered it. I don't know where he would have gone this year. I don't think he would have been a first round or second round pick this year, but he's going to get the opportunity to build on what he did last year. Yeah, they're bringing back a lot of talent. The guys they brought in with this last class are both expected to be in the mix somewhere along the offensive line. They're headed in a great direction on the offensive line. I feel really confident. In fact, I would argue that's their most loaded position. And as you pointed out, a lot of 4 stars, depending on what recruiting site you give the most credibility to. Seems like just about everyone has quite a few 4 stars on this offensive line. And even the guys that weren't 4 stars, could also make a splash. There's a couple of guys there that weren't as highly rated out of high school, but could absolutely push some folks around up there on the offensive line, on the line of scrimmage for the Hogs.
The second, third, and fourth rated players in this class of 2022 are all offensive linemen. Tackle Andrew Chambly, 23rd rated tackle in the nation, 6'7", 305. Emarion Harris, 6'7", 370 at offensive tackle as well, out of Little Rock, and out of Memphis, Patrick Kudus, interior offensive lineman, guard, center. So yeah, they could get some immediate help if they need it, but those guys may also have the luxury just to kind of kick back and develop for a year before they're needed.
Yeah, and Patrick Kutas, who I think Arkansas was one of the first schools to offer him to actually play offensive line. He was actually a defensive lineman throughout most of his recruiting process, and he played obviously both sides of the line of scrimmage. And Sam Pittman and that staff, they all recognize, wait a minute, he's actually a pretty damn good offensive lineman. He's a 0.89 4-star composite on 247. As an offensive lineman or as a defensive lineman, but he's highly thought of as an offensive lineman. So I think he's a 4-star on both sides of the ball. What you have here really is a 4-star athlete who happens to play on the offensive line or on the line of scrimmage. Again, good size, 6'6", 303. I don't know what they're planning with him, if they're going to move him at right tackle. They like those lengthy guards too. They like those guys that are 6'6", 6'7" at guard. We've seen them move some guys around a little bit. In fact, Tykees Crawford, they moved around, who's a 4-star who actually was committed to Arkansas out of high school. Then he ended up having to go to Charlotte for a year, and then he's back. They moved him around, and that was another question. Like, what do they do with Dalton Wagner if he leaves? Wagner's coming back, and Wagner, outside of getting lost on the snap counts, that's his only weakness, I would argue, as a returning starter on this offensive line. He's a solid blocker for them. So now it's like, what do we do with these other, Tykees Crawford? I think the expectations were, especially now that Ty Clary's gone, another former Fayetteville Bulldog, he's gone. So now that means we're going to have Crawford step up at the right tackle spot because Clary had also shared some time at that position. But then they got the kind of surprising announcement that Dalton Wagner was going to come back. Not that he was going to go pro, but maybe he might just hang up his cleats because he's been here a while. He's dealt with some injuries. So yeah, they're loaded up, man. I mean, the talent in that room probably matches the receiver room in terms of star power. It's pretty impressive, and again, not shocking considering Sam Pittman being your head coach.